Hey, I'm Brian Geisel, and you're watching Software Off the Cuff. Today, this is our first episode. I'm going to talk real briefly about what we're going to be doing here in Software Off the Cuff. And then, like every episode, let's dive down in on an issue. My notes stay on a Post-it. So let's talk briefly about what it is we're going to be talking about. We're going to be talking about things in one of two main categories. I'm a software developer. I've been developing software in all kinds of spaces for a very long time, longer than I care to admit these days. And the other thing is, today I run a software company. And so I've been running a company. I've been doing consulting and companies for a very long time. This particular company I've been running for the past 6 years. So I've got some advice both on running a company, on consulting, on those kinds of things as well. So we're going to talk about, as a company, what kinds of things you can be doing to improve your software, the life of your software developers, if you have software developers in-house. We're going to be talking about all these topics. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the environments for software developers. And so as maybe a CEO, as a product manager, as HR at a company that's got software developers, how many companies today don't have software developers as a part of their overall staff at the company? Let's talk about what it is that makes software developers tick. And again, no notes for this. Let's just talk about it off the cuff. These are the kinds of things we talk about every day as we're doing life in our company and doing life as software developers. So the greatest analogy I found that I love about software developers is that software developers are like bees. Why are software developers like bees? Because bees make honey. Nobody has to ask them to make honey. Nobody convinces them or tricks them into making honey. Nobody has to motivate them to make honey. What do bees do? They make honey. Turns out they don't even care if you take some. Whether you're a bear or a human or a honey badger. They don't care. They're making honey. As long as you take some of it, leave them some, bees are happy. So software developers are the same. As a software developer, we make software. No one has to ask us to make software, to tell us to make software, and you don't even have to motivate us to make software. It's what we do. It's who we are. But like a hive of bees, you wouldn't go poke the hive of bees, right? If you're a beekeeper, you do everything you can to keep the bees happy because the bees just keep making honey. As long as they're happy bees, they're making honey. Software developers, we do the same thing. We just want to be happy. There's certain things that are not intuitive to someone who's not developing software that are intuitive to software developers that we don't always know how to communicate to someone else as to this is why this thing is important. One of the things that we do is to write software well and efficiently. And if you're new to software development or you're learning software, maybe you're studying software in college, this is something that I'd like you to understand because it's what separates people who just write software from the really elite developers. And this is, to do it well, you have to fit an awful lot of things in your head at once. And I've heard people say that this isn't true. It is true. To be top-notch, you've got to fit a lot of things in your head at once because every change you make in software, one little change that you make here affects something 1,000 lines of code over there and 100,000 lines of code away over there. But they both interact. They don't look related in any way, shape, or form, except when you make this one change, then suddenly they're related. And so a lot of times as a software developer, you're just reading through pages and pages of code. In fact, I've learned for myself to just trust the process. I'll start reading code and I'm thinking, I don't have any idea what this code does. I'm not learning anything. I don't feel like I'm grokking it, not getting it at all. And in fact, I've learned that that's a very important process for me to finally grok the code. Grok is to understand it in a way that is intimate and personal, and it just becomes a part of you. And that's what you have to do with code to really be able to develop software at a high level. Those people who can write code super efficiently with very low bugs, that's what's happening, is they're putting the whole process in their head. They're diving deep into things that nobody else would want to dive into and dig into. They're getting it into their heads. What that means from someone who's the beekeeper, leave us alone. That's why you'll see software developers get so grumpy about being disturbed. It's why you'll see software developers. I talked to a friend recently who said they were having this big discussion about whether or not software developers should have to wear shoes if they're going to the cafeteria. And that sounds totally crazy when you're from the outside world. But one of the things that I've learned through the process of developing software is why it's said that Einstein only had one outfit so that he didn't have to use any brain power to figure out what he was going to wear that day. And it's really crazy how much brain power you spend on odd things. Look at somebody when you ask somebody a really difficult question. Notice they'll always avert their eyes from your eyes, because it turns out there's a personal thing that eye to eye, it takes energy. It takes brain power. You're not consciously thinking, I'm staring in your eyes, I'm staring in your eyes, right? But something is happening subconsciously. Processing is being used. That's why when you ask somebody, what's 1024 times 256? Eyes go up here as they're starting to work through the math on that, right? And so it's part of the deal. And so as a software developer, one of the things we do at our company is we give software developers their space. We have meetings, sure, but our meetings are quick and to the point. If you take a software developer out of what they're working on, you could take them away for 30 seconds and you could lose 2, 3, 4 days of work. Even more, actually, sometimes. Sometimes it's just because they've been distracted and they got off a point. Sometimes it's because that whole world that they were imagining, envisioning, and holding in their brain came collapsing down when you interrupted them. And so you can imagine how frustrated they are. They know they just lost 5 days of work. You can't imagine how that could possibly be true. They'll just go back to what they were doing. What they were doing was building up this entire model in their head that might have taken them 5 days already, and they finally got there. If you come in at that moment and interrupt, the whole thing comes crashing down, and now you've got to build it all up again. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just really hard to build it up again. So those are some of the things generally. We'll talk about more stuff and the environment that we have and how developers relate and work, I'm sure, and all kinds of things. I think the most powerful thing that could help make this more productive is if you ask questions. Let me know what your questions are, either as a software developer, why is this good and that's bad, or as a manager or as a CEO, as a product manager, why do software developers behave this way? Or ask me questions about companies. Hey, you built your company and it does this, this, and this. How is that? Or how did you get there? Or how do you deal with your marketing? Or any of those questions. I'm happy to field those as well. So let's see where this takes us. Again, I'm Brian Geisel, and this is Software Off the Cuff.